Payback Times.
The proxy statement glowed on my screen, its thick, expensive paper no shield against the words that burned in the footnotes. My coffee had gone cold, forgotten. To any other investor, the glossy quarterly report from Sterling and Locke Capital was a symphony of growth. Revenue up 8.2%. Assets under management at a record $42 billion. To my eye, trained by a decade of hunting ghosts in machine code and loopholes in legalese, those numbers were just a pretty facade. My focus was a single paragraph in the appendix. Section 4.7b, Discretionary Director Compensation. The language was new, a masterclass in obfuscation. Last year's proxy had a clear itemized list for board pay. This was a blanket authorization. It granted the Compensation Committee the power to award special, discretionary bonuses, with no requirement for specific shareholder approval. The criteria were fluffy, unassailable. Alignment with long-term value creation. Exceptional stewardship. To most, it read as sensible flexibility. To me, it glowed on the page like a radioactive isotope, a silent, elegant dilution of power. Our power. You clever bastard, I murmured to the quiet hum of my home office. My husband Raj padded in, dressed for his morning bike ride. He took one look at my face and leaned against the door frame. That's your someone is trying to pull a fast one face. What's the damage? I held up the page. Sterling and Locke. Alistair Thorne is setting up a slush fund for the board, and he's asking us to sign the withdrawal slip. Raj came over, his brows knitted. He's a structural engineer who thinks in load-bearing walls, not equity and votes. He scanned the paragraph. It just says they can get bonuses. Isn't that normal? It's how it's done, I said, swiveling my chair to face him. When we bought those shares, we bought two things, an economic right to profits and a voting right. Our voice. This is Thorne trying to make our votes meaningless on a key issue. How much of our company's money goes into the directors' pockets? I drew an invisible chart on the desk. Say the company makes $100. We vote to pay the board 10. That's fine. Now, with this language, the board can vote themselves another 20. Call it discretionary, and we have no specific say. They dilute our shares to enrich themselves. They're not stealing, not legally. They're redirecting the stream before it reaches our pond. And they're asking us to give them the shovel. He absorbed the metaphor. So it's a vote about voting. Exactly, a meta vote. Lose this one, lose leverage on countless others. It's the first brick from the foundation. I leaned back, the leather, sighing. Thorne's betting shareholders see the great numbers and vote yes on everything. He's betting they won't read the footnotes. Raj kissed the top of my head. But he didn't bet on your preternatural addiction to footnotes. What's the play? First, I listen, I said, turning to my screens. There's an investor, Q&A in 20 minutes. Time to see how smooth the facade is. The virtual meeting window opened. Alistair Thorne's face filled the screen, a tasteful New York skyline behind him. His silver hair was perfect. His suit a study in authority. Finance incarnate. He fielded softballs with polished ease. My question queued up, phrased with careful neutrality. On page 23, administrative and general expenses have risen 22% year over year, outpacing revenue growth. Could you provide more color on the key drivers? Thorne's smile held, but a minuscule tightening pinched the corners of his eyes. A very astute observation, he said, my name, Priya Varma, Varma Capital, hanging in the digital air. We are investing heavily in top-tier talent and state-of-the-art compliance infrastructure. Essential investments to safeguard client assets. It's a matter of quality, not just cost. A perfect, unassailable, and utterly empty answer. Which talent? What infrastructure? The 22% was a black box. Later, he chuckled at a question about the board's time. Our new committee structures allow for agile, strategic discussions beyond the formal schedule. Quality of oversight. Quality, strategic. The buzzwords piled up, a wall of verbal insulation. My unease tuned into a sharper, more suspicious frequency. Where there was this much fog, there was something to hide. The call ended. Silence settled back into my office. Thorne's confident smile and afterimage. My next move was a foundational right few shareholders used. I drafted a formal, precise email to the corporate secretary of Sterling and Locke. Pursuant to Section 220 of the Delaware General Corporation Law, I hereby formally request to inspect the minutes and supporting materials from the last 2 meetings of the board's compensation committee. The law was clear. Shareholders had a right to inspect books and records for a proper purpose. Ensuring the board wasn't abusing its duty with this new discretionary clause was as proper as it got. The response came not from the secretary, but from Thorne's own executive assistant, a woman named Evelyn with a voice like chilled vodka. Ms. Varma, Mr. Thorne is personally overseeing your request. The documents will be couriered. 2 days later, a slim embossed folder arrived. Inside were 12 pages. The minutes were so heavily redacted, they looked like a classified report, whole paragraphs blacked out. References to Project Apex and an alternative asset pivot were obliterated. Only procedural fluff remained visible. A sticky note was attached in elegant script. Priya, some aspects of compensation strategy are tied to confidential initiatives. We must protect competitive information. Trust you understand. A T. My fingers tightened on the paper. Trust you understand. A gauntlet wrapped in silk. He was using confidentiality as a shield to hide the very discussions that would show if this bonus pool was for performance or for plunder. This wasn't transparency, it was theater. The cold determination solidified, a glacier forming in my chest. He was playing a game, counting on inertia. I needed more than redacted pages. I needed a source. I scrolled through my old compliance contacts. Martin Choi, a whiz-kid quant from my Fed days, now a risk manager at a major prime brokerage that did business with firms like Sterling and Locke. I called his personal cell. After pleasantries, I circled in. Martin, I've got a substantial position in Sterling and Locke. Heard any whispers? Anything outside their usual lane? A long pause filled with a distant New York siren. Priya, he said, his voice dropping, you didn't hear this from me, but my desk has seen a notable uptick in activity for S&L, complex stuff, not typical rebalancing, leveraged derivatives, concentrated bets on volatile sectors. It smells like proprietary trading, a lot of it. Proprietary trading, using the firm's own balance sheet for risky bets. A world away from conservative wealth management, incredibly capital intensive. It could generate huge gains or catastrophic losses. Losses that would come directly from the equity I owned. How notable an uptick. Enough for internal memos to flag them for concentration risk. They're building a book, Priya, a big one, and they're not talking about it. Thank you, Martin. Just be careful, he said, and the line went dead. I placed the phone gently on its cradle. The pieces snapped together with an almost audible click. The vague proxy language, the redacted minutes hiding strategic initiatives, the surging administrative costs for hiring secret traders, the proprietary trading book. It was a trap. Use shareholder money to fund high-risk bets. Use the discretionary bonus clause to reward the board lavishly if those bets paid off. Siphoning profits before they flowed to shareholders. And if the bets blew up, shareholders would bear the loss, while the board would have already pocketed their strategic contribution bonuses. Heads, they win. Tails, we lose. My $5 million wasn't just at risk from market forces. It was fuel for a hidden engine, and the drivers were preparing to award themselves trophies from the fuel supply. The formal denial of my request for unredacted minutes arrived by email an hour later, a legalistic brush-off citing trade secrets. Expected, but galling. As I drafted a terse reply, the intercom buzzed. A messenger at my gate. I went downstairs. He handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with a silver Sterling and Lock logo. An invitation. The board of directors requested the pleasure of my company at the annual meeting of shareholders, in person at their Manhattan headquarters. A summons to the castle. Paper clipped to it was a smaller card of heavy stock. The same handwriting as the sticky note. Hope to see you there, Priya. Time for the grown-ups to talk strategy. Alistair. I held the card by its edges, as if it were contaminated. The gall, the paternalistic condescension. Grown-ups. He was framing my scrutiny as childish nitpicking, my lawful inspection as a nuisance. He was inviting me into his arena, confident it was his natural habitat. But as I stood in the marble foyer, the afternoon light fading, I felt no fear, only a sharp, clean focus. The problem was confirmed. The betrayal was not of law, perhaps, but of fiduciary duty, of the covenant between steward and owner. He wanted to talk strategy? Good. I finally had mine. The annual meeting was no longer a procedural formality. It was a battlefield, and I had 6 weeks to arm myself with every bylaw, every precedent, every legal nuance I could muster. He saw a nuisance minority shareholder. I saw a fiduciary breach in progress. I was no longer just an investor, I was the inspector, and the inspection had just begun. The embossed invitation lay on my desk like a dormant challenge. Thorne's handwritten note, time for the grown-ups to talk strategy, wasn't just condescension, it was intelligence. It told me he viewed my scrutiny as a petty rebellion, not a principled stand. He believed the arena of the boardroom, the soft leather and hushed tones of high finance, was his natural element. My job, in the 6 weeks before the annual meeting, was to make it mine. Strategy began with architecture. You don't fight a fortress with shouts, you study its blueprints. I needed a builder who understood both the law and the unspoken rules of corporate siege warfare. A name surfaced from memory, Martin Chen. I'd crossed paths with him years ago during the settlement of a messy fintech intellectual property dispute. He was a securities litigation partner at Kelton and Pierce, known for being fiercely intelligent, brutally direct, and possessing the patience of a glacier. He didn't do flashy press conferences. He built labyrinths of precedent and procedure that trapped arrogant defendants long before they ever saw a courtroom. His office in the financial district was a study in sharp angles and cool light, a stark contrast to Thorne's clubby opulence. Chen himself was a man of precise movements, his dark eyes missing nothing as I entered. Priya Varma, he said, not smiling, gesturing to a chair. Compliance turned capitalist. And now you have a board problem. I have a fiduciary breach problem, I corrected gently, placing a folder on his glass desk. Inside was a timeline I'd constructed, the proxy language, the redacted minutes, my notes from the call with Martin Choi about proprietary trading. He read in silence, his fingers steepled. 10 minutes passed, marked only by the soft hum of the climate control. Finally, he looked up. Alistair Thorne? He's old school. He thinks the boardroom is a private gentleman's club and the shareholders are merely the dues-paying members in the outer hall. This, he tapped the page about the discretionary compensation, is the lock on the club door. The proprietary trading is the secret bar inside where they're drinking the good stuff. I need to see the bar tab, I said. Then you use your key. He leaned forward, the glass desk reflecting the hard lines of his face. You're a shareholder. You own a piece of the machine. Delaware law gives you the right to inspect the machine's schematics, provided you have a proper purpose. Investigating potential mismanagement and fiduciary breach is the quintessential proper purpose. This isn't a request, it's a statutory demand. He pulled a legal pad closer, his pen moving with quick, sure strokes. Section 220 of the Delaware General Corporation Law. It's your flashlight. You demand to inspect books and records, not just the sanitized minutes they sent you, everything. Emails from the compensation committee discussing Project Apex, risk audit reports on the trading desk, ledgers showing capital allocations, the board's approval for the new compliance hires. Let's see if those administrative costs were for cybersecurity or for bonus pools. He made it sound simple and surgical. What if they deny it again? Chen allowed himself a thin, dry smile. Then we go to the Court of Chancery. They have to demonstrate your purpose is improper, which it isn't, or that the documents are not essential to that purpose. A judge will look at this. He gestured to my timeline, and see a credible basis for suspicion. The court will compel them. They have to show you the bones of the machine, Priya. Every email, every memo. The threat of that exposure alone is a powerful lever. Thorne's world runs on discretion. A judicial order for transparency is his kryptonite. The lesson was clear. Ownership wasn't passive. The right to information was the primary tool of enforcement. My voting power was blunt. My inspection right was a scalpel. We draft the demand letter, Chen said, his voice flat and certain. It will be a masterpiece of legal precision, unassailable. We serve it formally. Then we wait. His response will tell us everything. I left Chen's office with a clarified mind and a cold purpose. The path was legal, methodical, and slow. It required a patience that Thorne would inevitably mistake for weakness. Back in my home office, I began building my own labyrinth. I created a new encrypted digital vault. Every email from Sterling and Locke, every piece of correspondence was archived and tagged. I started a log, a contemporaneous record of events. April 12th, received redacted minutes. April 14th, call with M. Choi, proprietary trading. April 15th, formal 220 demandal. 15th, formal 220 demand drafted with M. Chen. California was a one-party consent state for recording calls. A small, high-quality digital recorder became a permanent fixture on my desk. Its silent presence, a reminder that every word exchanged was now potential architecture. Next, I mapped the enemy's fortifications. Sterling and Locke was publicly traded, but Thorne, through a web of family trusts and holding companies, held a controlling 34% of the voting shares. The rest was a mix of large index funds, a few boutique investment firms, and individual investors like me. The index funds were the key. They voted automatically with management, a lazy river of support Thorne relied upon. But the boutiques? They were more discerning. I pulled their securities and exchange commission filings, studied their environmental and social governance policies, looked for any history of activism. I identified 3 firms that had previously voted against excessive compensation plans at other companies. They were potential allies, or at the very least, not automatic enemies. A week after my meeting with Chen, the formal Section 220 demand was served by courier to Sterling and Locke's registered office in Wilmington, Delaware. It was 13 pages long, citing specific clauses, defining books and records in painstaking detail, and laying out the proper purpose with the calm, devastating logic Chen was known for. It was a declaration of war written in the sterile language of law. Thorne's first countermove was social. An invitation arrived for a pre-annual general meeting investor reception at the top of the Standard in New York. Cocktails and canapes with the board. It was a classic tactic. The soft sell, the charm offensive. Isolate the troublemaker. Make them feel like an outsider at the party. I bought a new dress, a simple, expensive sheath in navy, professional but unassuming. I would be a ghost at his feast. The event was a masterclass in curated power. The views were breathtaking. The champagne was Tétinger Comte. and the air hummed with the low, confident voices of men who were used to winning. Thorne worked the room like a conductor, a hand on a shoulder here, a rich, manufactured laugh shared there. He saw me and made a beeline, his smile expansive and practiced. "Priya, you made it. So glad." He took my hand in both of his, a gesture of patriarchal warmth that felt like being smothered by a blanket. I was hoping we could move past all this paperwork. "I'm always interested in dialogue, Alistair," I said, my smile matching his in politeness, but not in reach. I accepted a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. "Good, good." He steered me slightly away from a nearby group, creating an illusion of privacy. "Look, I get it. You're diligent. I admire that. But these demands, they create a negative tone. The board feels under attack. It makes governance harder, not easier." I played my part, letting a flicker of concerned uncertainty into my eyes. "I just want to understand the strategy, the rising costs, the new compensation structure. It feels sudden." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a confiding murmur. "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. Off the record, we're positioning for a major shift, a more dynamic asset mix. The old, staid wealth management model is a commodity. The future is in strategic partnerships, alternative yields. That requires flexibility, and it requires rewarding the board for visionary leadership, not just for showing up to meetings." He patted my arm, a condescension disguised as camaraderie. "Trust the process, Priya. We're creating value for you." It was a perfect performance. The visionary leader, slightly exasperated by the small-minded concerns of a minor shareholder. He was selling me the same story he'd sold the board. That scrutiny was the enemy of progress. I nodded, appearing to absorb his wisdom. "I appreciate you taking the time to explain," I said, my voice softening deliberately. "The legal route is so adversarial. I'd much prefer clarity." He beamed, the trap in his mind surely snapping shut. "Exactly. We're on the same side. Let's have a proper sit-down after the annual meeting. I think you could bring a valuable perspective." The promise of inclusion, of a seat at the grown-ups table, dangled like a shiny lure before me. I circulated a while longer, a silent observer. I caught snippets from other investors. Alistair says they've got a game changer in the works. The numbers are solid. Why rock the boat? The fog of war was Thorne's natural habitat, and he was expert at deploying it. When I left, I felt his gaze on my back, satisfied. He believed he'd neutralized a threat with a glass of champagne and a pat on the arm. The formal response to our Section 220 demand arrived 2 days later. It wasn't from the corporate secretary. It was on Thorne's personal, thick-crested letterhead. "Dear Priya, I have reviewed your counsel's extensive demand with both amusement and disappointment. It is a scattergun approach, fishing for issues where none exist. The proprietary trading activities you reference are a modest, well-hedged pilot program, fully compliant with our risk frameworks. The compensation discussions are protected as confidential business strategy, essential to retaining top-tier director talent. Your demand, therefore, lacks a proper purpose. It seems motivated more by personal pique than shareholder value. I urge you to reconsider this antagonistic path. It serves no one, least of all your investment. Let's stop this nonsense. I am, despite this, willing to discuss a potential advisory role or even a board observer seat for you, where you can gain the understanding you seek in a constructive forum. Sincerely, Alistair Thorne. Chen called me minutes after I emailed him a scan of the letter. He took the bait, he said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. He denied it personally. He didn't have the lawyers do it. That's pure ego. And he offered a SOP, a board observer seat. That's him trying to buy your silence with the illusion of access. A classic, transparent move. What's next? I asked, the cold focus within me solidifying into something diamond hard. We file the petition in Delaware. It's a procedural slam dunk, but it takes time. The annual meeting will happen long before a judge rules. That was the timeline then. The legal battle was a parallel track, a slow, grinding process of attrition. The meeting itself was the immediate theater of war. My own quiet investigation, however, turned up a more immediate and potent weapon. Digging through county real estate records and cross-referencing them with Sterling and Locke's Securities and Exchange Commission filings on related party transactions, I found it. A commercial property in Miami's Brickell district, purchased 18 months ago by a limited liability company called Apex Holdings. The registered agent for Apex was a law firm that also did substantial work for Thorne's family trust. The property was mortgaged to the teeth, and the lender, a subsidiary of Sterling and Locke Capital. The company had, it appeared, extended a multi-million-dollar loan to a shadow entity owned by its own chairman, using the company's own capital as collateral. The disclosed related party transaction in the annual report was vague, calling it only a strategic investment in a growth market real estate vehicle. The staggering size of the loan and the direct personal benefit to Thorne were meticulously buried. It was a clear, glaring breach of the duty of loyalty. A director using company funds to bankroll his personal speculation at the company's risk. This wasn't just poor oversight. It was self-dealing of the most blatant kind. I added the documents to the encrypted vault. It was a trump card, but one I couldn't play yet. Revealing it now would only give him time to concoct a story, to restructure the deal on paper. It had to come out at the perfect moment, in the right forum, where he had no room to maneuver. The week before the meeting, the whispers started. My brother Raj heard it from a friend at a competing fund. "I heard you're going full activist on Sterling and Locke," the friend had said, not unkindly. "Alistair's telling people you're a bit emotional about the investment, that you don't grasp the big picture." Thorne was isolating me, painting me as a hysterical woman upset that the boys wouldn't let her into the treehouse. It was a gendered, tired trope, but it was often effective in this world of old money manners and new money ruthlessness. My credibility was the second front in his war, and he was attacking it with gossip. The day before I was to fly to New York, the summons came. Another handwritten note delivered by a hotel concierge to my room at the Peninsula. "Priya, before the circus tomorrow, let's have one last quiet chat. My office, 7 p.m. A. Chen advised strenuously against going. He's trying to rattle you, to feel you out one last time. Don't give him the satisfaction or the ammunition." "I won't give him anything," I said, "but I'll take everything he offers." I checked the recorder in my purse, a smaller, more discreet model than the one on my desk. Its status light was off, its operation completely silent. The Sterling and Locke headquarters at night were a cathedral of silent, sleeping money. The reception desk was empty, the vast marble floors gleaming under strategically dimmed lights. A weary-looking assistant escorted me to the 60th floor. Thorne's office was exactly as I'd imagined it would be. Dark mahogany, shelves of leather-bound books that looked unread, a gleaming Cartier desk clock, and that breathtaking, arrogant view of the city laid out at his feet like a conquered kingdom. He stood by the window, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He didn't turn around immediately. "The city looks peaceful from here, doesn't it?" he said, his voice echoing slightly in the large, quiet space. "All that chaos reduced to pretty, orderly lights." "It's a powerful perspective," I agreed neutrally, staying near the door. He finally turned. He dispensed with his suit jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, the picture of a man working late into the night. "I wanted to see you without the lawyers, Priya. Man to man, as it were." The phrase was another subtle, pointed jab. This petition you filed, it's a waste of everyone's time and money. My money, your money. The law seems to think it's a valid question, I said, keeping my voice flat and devoid of challenge. The law, he scoffed, taking a slow sip of his drink. The law is a tool for those who can't win in the open market. You're an investor. You should understand value creation, not value destruction through pointless litigation. He walked to his desk and leaned against it, looming in the subdued light. I'll be blunt. The board is irritated. Your little crusade is a distraction. We have a multi-billion-dollar institution to run. We don't have time to educate every minor shareholder on every nuanced decision. The mask of the charming patriarch was gone, completely stripped away, replaced by the cold steel of the majority holder. That board observer seat, it's still on the table, but only if you drop this Section 220 farce immediately. Come inside, see how we operate from the inside. You might actually learn something. And if I don't? I asked, tilting my head slightly. He smiled, a thin, cold line that didn't touch his eyes. Then tomorrow, at the meeting, you will be treated as what you are, a disruptive outsider. Your proposals will be voted down by a margin that will embarrass you. Your questions will be gavelled through with curt, formal answers. You will sit in that room and watch the machinery of corporate governance operate exactly as it is designed to, utterly without you. And then, Priya, your reputation in this very small, very talkative world will be cemented as that of a gadfly, a rich hobbyist who throws tantrums when she doesn't get her way. That label will follow you. It will make other boards think twice before ever taking your money. Is that really what you want for your future? He was laying it out with breathtaking arrogance. Compliance or exile. He truly believed the structure he commanded was unassailable, and that I was a minor irritant to be swatted away or bought off. I let the silence hang for a long moment, feigning a troubled consideration. You make a very persuasive case about reputation, Alistair. I'm a realist, he said, his tone warming a fraction, seeing the capitulation he expected. This is a sphere for grown-ups. Sometimes the shareholders need to simply trust that the board has the company's and their best interests at heart. All this transparency fetish, it's for the newspapers and the activists, not for the boardroom. True strategy happens in the shadows. That's where real value is built. There it was, the core of his contempt, spoken aloud. Transparency fetish, true strategy happens in the shadows. He had just articulated, in his own unmistakable voice, the very philosophy I was fighting against. I nodded slowly, looking down as if weighed down by his logic. I'll think about what you've said. Good. He pushed off the desk, the deal seemingly sealed in his mind. Sleep on it. The offer is good until gavel in tomorrow. I left his office, the heavy oak door whispering shut behind me with a sound of finality. In the silent, empty elevator descending, I didn't immediately press the button for the lobby. I stood perfectly still, surrounded by my own reflection in the polished brass walls. Then I reached into my purse. My fingers found the small, hard rectangle of the recorder. I pressed the stop button. The soft, tactile click was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in weeks. A thin, cold smile touched my lips, unseen in the elevator's mirrored walls. He had shown me his entire hand. He believed the trap was his, woven from social pressure, legal delay, and the potent threat to my professional reputation. He believed I was isolated, outmatched, and finally ready to bargain. He was wrong. The trap was mine. He had just provided, in his own condescending tone, the evidence of his corrupt mindset, the disparagement of shareholder oversight, the blatant admission that true strategy was deliberately hidden from the owners. It was context, color, and powerful motive, and it was now preserved. Digitally, a perfect damning record. The annual meeting was no longer just a forum for a vote. It was the spring of the trap. And he, in his towering, overconfident office, had just carefully placed his own foot into it. All that remained was for me to release the lever. The morning of the annual meeting dawned clear and sharp over Manhattan, a perfect blue sky that felt like a taunt. I dressed with deliberate care in a tailored charcoal suit, a single strand of pearls from my mother, and shoes with a low, stable heel. This was armor, not a costume. I reviewed the contents of my slim leather portfolio one final time. Inside was a printed copy of the derivative complaint Martin Chen had filed confidentially with the Delaware Court of Chancery at 8:01 that morning, a USB drive containing the cued audio clip from Thorne's office, and a 10-page summary of the self-dealing Apex Holdings loan distilled for a non-legal audience. My phone was silenced. My recorder waited in my purse. I felt a profound and eerie calm. The preparation was over. Now came the execution. Sterling and Locke's boardroom was a temple to masculine, moneyed austerity. 20-foot ceilings soared above a massive oval table of black walnut, surrounded by leather chairs so deep they seemed to swallow sound. Stern-faced founders gazed down from portraits. The air held the sense of a lemonwood polish and expensive aftershave. Roughly 40 people filled the room. The 8 board members with Thorne at the head, a few senior executives, a court reporter, and a scattering of other shareholders, mostly impassive representatives from the large index funds. Thorne gavelled the meeting to order precisely at 10 a.m. His eyes swept the room, lingering on me for a fraction of a second too long. A faint, smug smile touched his lips. He believed last night's conversation had secured my compliance, or at least my terrified silence. "Welcome, owners of Sterling and Locke," he began, his voice filling the space without amplification. "We have a concise agenda today, a report from your board, the election of directors, and the advisory vote on executive compensation. Our performance, as you've seen, speaks for itself." He delivered a brief, glowing summary of the financials, the same documents I had pored over for weeks. He spoke of strategic horizons and agile governance, a smooth recitation, utterly devoid of substance. The index fund representatives nodded along, their voting proxies already committed to support management. Then the votes began. We will now vote on Proposal 1. The election of the slate of director nominees. He read the names, his own first. All those in favor? A forest of hands rose around the table, followed by a slower wave from the fund managers. It was a foregone conclusion. Proposal 2, the advisory vote to approve named executive officer compensation. Again, the same mechanical assent started to build. "Mr. Chairman?" My voice, cool and clear, cut through the procedural murmur. Every head turned. Thorne's smile didn't fade, but it hardened at the edges. "Yes, Ms. Varma? We are in the middle of a vote. Under the company's bylaws and state law, I have the right to speak before a vote is closed on a matter properly before the shareholders," I said, my hands folded calmly on the table. I wish to exercise that right. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. He had hoped I wouldn't have the nerve. "Very well. Briefly, please. We have a full agenda." I stood, not aggressively, but to be seen by the whole room. I felt the weight of the portrait's gazes and the curious stares of the fund managers. "My name is Priya Varma. I own just over 2% of this company. For months, I have sought clarity from this board on fundamental issues: exploding administrative costs, a dangerously vague executive compensation authority, and evidence of a shift into high-risk proprietary trading. My requests for information, a basic shareholder right, have been met with redactions, condescension, and personal denial." Thorne sighed audibly, a performative sound of strained patience. "Priya, dear, we appreciate your passion. But this is a boardroom, not a classroom. Some strategic matters are simply too complex for cocktail party analysis. The board has the expertise and discretion to manage them for all shareholders. He was using the same gendered, dismissive language from his private whispers. Too complex. Cocktail party analysis. It was meant to belittle and isolate me. I did not flinch. I reached into my portfolio and withdrew the single sheet summarizing the Apex Holdings loan. Is the complexity you refer to the same complexity that allowed Sterling and Locke to extend a $42 million loan at a below-market rate to Apex Holdings, a commercial real estate venture whose beneficial owner is you, Mr. Thorne? The room went utterly still. The court reporter's fingers froze before resuming their frantic tap. One fund manager leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Thorne's face drained of color. That is a gross mischaracterization of a fully disclosed, arm's-length strategic investment, he blustered, a crack in his smooth baritone. Disclosed in a single line item, yes, I said, my voice still calm. The terms, the risk to company capital, the personal benefit, all omitted. That is not strategy. That is a breach of your fiduciary duty of loyalty. This is outrageous slander, Thorne snapped, half rising. I will not have this meeting hijacked by baseless accusations. Security? Before you call security, Mr. Chairman, I said, pulling out the USB drive. Perhaps the other shareholders would like context for your strategic philosophy. Last night, in this building, you told me, and I quote, true strategy happens in the shadows. That's where value is built. All this transparency fetish. It's for the newspapers, not the boardroom. You also stated the new discretionary compensation clause was designed to keep the talent happy, shareholder votes be damned. The blood left Thorne's face entirely. He looked like a man watching an unsinkable ship strike the iceberg. You recorded a private conversation, he whispered, horrified. In a one-party consent state concerning potential criminal activity, it is not only legal, it is prudent, I said. I placed the drive on the table. But the recording is merely color. The substance is in the documents you refuse to provide, which is why, this morning, a shareholder derivative lawsuit was filed in Delaware, alleging gross mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty against you and the entire board. The complaint is based on evidence, including a full, unredacted copy of the internal audit of the proprietary trading desk, the one you called a modest pilot program. I did not have the full audit, but Martin Choi's tip provided enough for the complaint to survive a motion to dismiss. The threat was what mattered now. It shows concentrated leveraged bets representing a risk. Exposure exceeding 15% of the firm's Tier 1 capital, directly contradicting your disclosures. The board members stared at Thorne, then at each other, panic cracking their composed facades. The fund managers pulled out phones, typing frantically. At that moment, the heavy boardroom door opened. 3 people in sober, dark suits entered. They did not look like employees. The woman held up a badge. Alistair Thorne, I'm Special Agent Perez with the Securities and Exchange Commission. These are investigators from the New York Attorney General's office. We have subpoenas for you, for the board, and for all records pertaining to Apex Holdings, the proprietary trading desk, and the Compensation Committee's deliberations on discretionary bonuses. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the thud of Thorne collapsing back into his chair. His gavel slipped and rolled across the polished table. Chaos erupted. Board members talked over each other as lawyers materialized. Fund managers spoke into phones with urgent voices. I simply stood, a still point in the storm. I caught the eye of one index fund representative, a woman I had identified as reasonable. She gave me a slow, acknowledging nod. The landscape of power had irrevocably shifted. Trading in Sterling and Locke shares was halted before noon. The now public derivative lawsuit froze the disputed assets and bonus pools. Thorne and 3 complicit board members were suspended by the shell-shocked remaining directors that same afternoon, facing immediate regulatory action and criminal investigation for securities fraud. The aftermath was a whirlwind of procedural cleanup, but now it was cleanup directed toward sunlight. An emergency shareholders meeting was called. With the index funds awakened to the liability they had almost rubber-stamped, I was elected to lead a special committee to oversee a new independent board and a complete governance overhaul. My reputation was not destroyed, it was cemented. I was no longer a gadfly. I was the shareholder who had caught the poison in the well. 6 months later, the calm in my home office felt different. It was the calm of order, not suspicion. On my screen was the new Sterling and Lock investor dashboard. Every committee report was posted. Every expense over $10,000 was listed with a business rationale. Executive compensation was broken down into base, bonus, and long-term equity, with clear performance metrics hyperlinked to the results. The proprietary trading desk was shuttered. The Apex Holdings loan had been recalled, with Thorne's personal assets pledged as collateral. An email notification chimed. The subject line read, Sterling and Lock Capital, quarterly, open forum for shareholders, your questions submitted in advance. I clicked accept. Raj entered, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He glanced at the screen. Another meeting? Don't they know you won? This is how you know you've won, I said, taking the warm mug. You don't fight a breach of trust with a shouting match. You fight it with a better prepared legal position, the right evidence, and the will to use the system designed to protect you. The victory isn't the confrontation. It's the new normal that comes after. He smiled, understanding. And the $5 million? It's not just safe, I said, a quiet satisfaction settling in my bones. It has grown. Transparency is undervalued until it's almost gone. Then it becomes the most precious asset on the balance sheet. I looked back at the invitation. I would prepare a question, of course, something forward-looking about climate risk in the bond portfolio. The work of an owner was never done. But now the ledger was open. The silence had been broken, and the arena, at last, belonged to everyone who had a stake in it.